Welcome, viewers and listeners, to another edition of CHP Talks. I'm here with repeat guest, Lawyer Lisa Miron. Lisa, it's a real pleasure to have you on again. I think it was back in January or February when you were on last time. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Rod. Time is flying by. Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and I think when I reached out to you, I said, wow, there's so much going on. And so I'm going to give you a little introduction for those who maybe missed your last interview here. Lisa Miron, some know her as Lawyer Lisa, is a barrister, a solicitor, an activist, and a writer. She's a lawyer who has practiced as a litigator. She's run her own firm for 11 years, has practiced in the tech and auto sector. She's done large file litigation, including files against the government and class action work. She's a wife and mother, a Christian, and a very proud Canadian. She has a Substack, which you'll want to go to, lawyerlisa.substack.com, where she educates and informs her readers and subscribers on a large number of issues, many of them connected to the globalist agenda, the loss of freedoms, and personal sovereignty. Just to give you a short list of some of those topics that she's touched on in the last few weeks: free speech, monkeypox, climate as it connects to race, digital currency, the grid failings, China's military, social media, the fires and the shortage of firefighters, or the difficulties that we have manning fires, Google's monopoly, 15-minute cities, and Gaza. So that's just a short list. There's many more topics, but I believe they're all connected in her mind. She knows how to tie these things together in a great way. And today, I'm going to ask her about 15-minute cities, electric vehicles, and how those topics may be connected to the Pandemic Prevention and Preparedness Bill, C-293, that passed the Canadian Parliament in June of this year. And so, Lisa, there's a lot to talk about, and I'm so glad that you've been able to join us again today. We look forward to hearing everything that you have to say to us.
Thank you, Rod. Glad to be here. Hi, everybody. These are very serious topics. It's very odd to be going through the material and enlightening people. And I think if you're getting your media source just from one spot, you're not having the in-depth analysis of what's really passing, what's really going on behind the scenes. I call it the municipal deep state, because while we're going to be looking at the Canadian situation with 15-minute cities, with C40 cities, with the global covenant of mayors, with complete streets, this is something that is going on. Okay, so I am sharing with you. And we are going to start with an organization called Complete Streets.
And for our listeners on the audio podcast, if you want to see what she's sharing on the screen, you're going to have to go to the video podcast. But anyway, just Lisa,
it's Complete Streets. Yeah, it's Complete Streets for Canada.ca. And, they have these great names for things, but then you dig a little bit and you find out what's really going on and what are complete streets. Well, they'll tell you up front that it's complete streets or streets that are safe for all users, regardless of age, ability, income, race, ethnicity, or mode of travel. So if you're maybe walking or biking, it's got to be safe for you. And that may mean less cars on the street, right? Is that what it means? By using a complete streets approach, designing road networks, we can create spaces that allow all users to thrive, not only motorists. So you can read more when you go there, but immediately you can see a map of the entire Canadian country and every city in Canada and where they are on their complete streets. So you, as a Canadian, not just in BC, but everywhere, you can go and decide, hey, what's going on with complete streets in my city? Where are we at? What's going on? What are the initiatives that are coming under this guise of complete streets? And you'll see that they increase bike lanes. That's one of the things that they do. But immediately, you'll also see that they have a section on complete streets and the 15-minute city. Okay, so complete streets for Canada.ca is not just really about, hey, having the right street light crossing so that you can cross safely at an intersection. This is way more in depth. It is about the 15-minute city. So we're going to toggle over to the 15-minute city. Oh, and in Ontario, if I have, I'm going to post this onto my Substack as well. The city that is most advanced with all the goals of complete streets is Mississauga. And Mississauga at the time was Bonnie Crombie, and Bonnie Crombie is now running for the Liberal Party. So she's really into complete streets and she's done all the requirements for complete streets, right? And it has the smart city infrastructure with it. It has your cameras with it. It has your changes. And it also has 15-minute cities. Now, mainstream media will be gaslighting us and telling us, oh, there's no such thing as a 15-minute city. But that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. In fact, these organizations that I call the municipal deep state are going clear around the world. And for my international viewers who listen to this on my blog afterwards, I want you to know that it could be 20-minute neighborhoods. It could be instead of complete streets, complete neighborhoods. They all have terms of art in each different city across the world or nation across the world. For Canada, it's complete streets. And then, so we're going to now look at the 15-minute cities, right? That they really enjoy. So, they're giving examples of what could be a 15-minute city. And so they're into the 15-minute city and they say, well, the principles of the 15 city, a case study of Ottawa, 4 ways the 15-minute city and complete streets can help each other. Okay, so they're interconnected through infrastructure. They'll share infrastructure. So if you're doing complete streets, you can also at the same time set up your city for future 15-minute cities. Safety, infrastructure, neighborhood contacts. Hey, in Ontario, Doug Ford just negotiated that we would have liquor in mixed drinks liquor in all of our stores, like grocery stores and convenience stores. So all of a sudden now we have liquor within 15 minutes of everybody, right? They slowly build this up without really people pushing in on what we're receiving as our news. So we just receive it. But no one's really asking those questions. Could that be related to 15-minute cities? Infrastructure, context, livability, sociability, increase economic activities, critiques, and drawbacks, okay? So they don't like gentrification, by the way. So this is this cute little report that we're going to go to, and you can pull it up yourself. And how the 15-minute city and complete streets work together. And so we can look at the BC, for instance, and a few cities in BC to find out where they're at on their complete streets. And I want you to get to the part where they work with C40, because we looked at C40. So this really ties together. And you see it has the same sort of,
C40 is the Global Covenant of Mayors, is that?
No, it's not. It's not the Global Covenant Mayors. I'll take you through that relationship. But sure. We'll look at C40 too.
Okay.
But C40 is the consumptive interventions to the individual. Okay, so here, oh wow, C40 is an international coalition of 97 cities dedicated to creating more sustainable urban lifestyles, outlines 4 core principles of a 15-minute city. Okay, so we've gone from complete streets to 15-minute cities to referencing C40. Okay.
Okay.
And so you are seeing issues in Winnipeg. You're seeing issues in Calgary. You're seeing issues with respect to changing densification. And, in Winnipeg, we're going to look at an issue with they call it the Plan to 2050. Now, Plan 2050 gives you the impression, oh, wow, that's a few decades away. I don't really have to think about it. Maybe, maybe I'll be dead. Maybe I'll be retired. It's all okay. Plan 2050 is being passed in Winnipeg, although there is right now some pushback, in 2025 with 3 years implementation. And it requires mandatory densification, right? And you have in Calgary all those issues with the mandatory densification that the Mayor Gondek pushed through. And she heard from a ton of people who said, no, I don't want to change my neighborhood to have massive densification right in my neighborhood. So every neighborhood has a variety of housing types, different sizes, levels of affordability. Residents of every neighborhood are able to breathe clean air free of harmful pollutants. It basically means you got to know how to read them. Harmful pollutants is coming from your cars. This is how they strip your mobility. People can walk close to home or remotely thanks to the presence of smaller scale offices, retail, hospitality, and working places. So Complete Streets is going clear across Canada. Complete Streets works with 15-minute cities, and their own 15-minute city report says, hey, we work with C40 principles. Now, when we went to C40 principles, let's see here, we looked at, and I'll just briefly take your viewers and listeners through the future of urban consumption in a 1.5 degree Celsius world for C40 cities. And with globalcovenantofmayors.org, you can search your cities. And with Global Covenant of Mayors, well, let's just pull them up to show you. The purpose of the Global Covenant of Mayors is to measure each city or town that's in there. And there's something like 15,000 cities across the world, all thumping to this municipal deep state, all thumping to these goals. And they measure the total greenhouse gas in their city. Okay, they have to take an inventory, right? Oh, this is what we're doing. This is our greenhouse gas emission. And then they have to get down to a greenhouse gas budget. Well, it's like, your budget at your household, right? So Global Covenant of Mayors gives each city a greenhouse gas budget. Well, C40 takes that budget and puts it to the people living in the cities that are the Global Covenant of Mayors and beyond the C40 cities themselves. Like some people think, oh, well, Canada only has Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto listed as C40 cities. But you see from Complete Streets and their relationship with 15-minute cities that they take in the principles behind C40.
Right.
Right? So if Global Covenant Mayors gives the budget, the greenhouse budget for every town and city, and that's around the whole world. That's why I call it the municipal deep state. Then then the future of urban consumption C40 cities headline reports tells us what we do. And I am going to take you to chapter 6. This is a high gloss, high value report, and it was done by the University of Leeds and Arup. And it is how we take a budget that we have in our city for greenhouse gas and drill it down to the individual. And in order to meet that 1.5 degrees Celsius, right, warming, what do we have to do by 2030? You remember, we're so close to 2025 now. Like, this is 5 years away, and you're already seeing this. You're already seeing this everywhere. So we have to take the budget, the greenhouse gas budget for buildings down by 44%, right? And that's the mandatory retrofit, which in Winnipeg is turning into somebody having a 1/3 acre home having to put in eight separate units. So if you're a single family home, it's just expropriation, because you won't be able to afford the mandatory densification. So your budget has to go down for buildings and infrastructure. And this got pushed through in Calgary. You've got all kinds of densification got pushed through in Calgary. Food goes down by 60%. You have to eat less, right? You have to eat different things. Your private transport has to go down by 39%. That's you if you have a car, right? So when you go back to that language and you listen to the things that they're saying about 15-minute cities and complete streets, walk or bike ride from one's home, it is literally taking us through this consumptive interventions. The clothing has to go down by 66%. What you can buy for clothing will go down. And your electronics and your aviation, you leaving the city. So we'll just briefly go.
Ask you a question regarding that. Now, how would they apply that to individuals? Like if the city takes it upon themselves to set this target, or they fall into it because of the Global Covenant and C-40, but how does it apply to individuals? Like what would be, have we seen anything of what would be the enforcement mechanism or the measuring tools that they would use?
Okay, well, so your measuring tools are what you're consuming. So they actually have individual charts, and then I'll give you an idea of so here's your material efficiency, enhanced building efficiency. Basically, it's mandatory. It's really a means of expropriation that goes in your official plans, right? Your official plans goes in your climate plans. So that's their mechanism of action. And I can take you through Toronto's. They have two individuals who are in charge of climate and on the council. Those two individuals advise council what bylaws need to be passed. Now, with the smart city infrastructure, they'll even tell you what bylaws for raising the money to put the cameras that end up watching you, right? The Smart City Infrastructure Fund helps finance all of this infrastructure, and that's clear across the world. That's not just here, that's clear across the world. For food, okay, 13% of your emissions come from food. So once you, as the Global Covenant of Mayors City, measure your emissions, you have to start the process. And to find out a lot about that process, you're going to visit the Global Covenant of Mayors.org site and find out where you are, where your city is at. And so here we are for food consumptive interventions. By 2030, 0 kilograms of meat by 2030, right? And then I'm going to take you to the pandemic legislation 293 that passed, okay? And I'm going to show you drastically how this stuff can be done through the pandemic. It's all related. It's so all related. 0 kilograms of dairy, milk, or derivative equivalent. So first they say, oh, dairy's so bad for you. You better take soy. Soy's so bad for you. Better take almond. Now we're at, old oatmeal right? There's oat milk now, and we all just gobble that all up. But you don't even get dairy equivalent, 0 kilograms. And so they have a progressive target by 2030, an ambitious target. Well, you just think, right, with your carbon passport, right, your individual carbon allotment that is done through online or through an app, right? You've already got Interact, you've got MasterCard that will give you, I think it's more MasterCard, that gives you how much CO2 that the item you purchased produced, right? So they're already starting that mechanism. And this is really interesting that your government, these C40 cities, right? David Miller, who used to be the past mayor of Toronto, was part of the hierarchy at C40. Okay, and now it's Sadiq Khan, who is the mayor of London. And he's pushing through technology, through the cameras of the smart city infrastructure that will take from your camera your license plate and charge you by the mile. So they have that ability, right? How do they get you out of your cars? Right? How? Right? On each level, there's a mechanism. And so the fact that we are being run by a municipal globalist state that runs all of our states, right? We have open borders, right? Immigration, immigration, immigration. That's a globalist policy where there's no states, right? And you have your new border is 15 minutes. Your new border is 15 minutes. And the most important thinkers of our time are not even addressing this. The other thing that it does is that you go from a rights-based existence, right? We have a constitution, we have a charter, we have a rights-based existence, to a permissive-based existence, where you require the permission to access what you previously did, right? That's your QR code to get into the restaurant. That's your QR code. You have the right QR code. You can go shopping. You can go to events. You have your vax status, right? That right QR code that was used for pandemics is the same QR code that can be used for your carbon allotment, right? You say, how could they do this? Well, they might not bring it into the stores, right? Let's keep going. Look at this. Textiles, 4% of your emissions. What's going to happen? 3 items of clothing per person per year. That's 3 new items, right? So it's your government who thinks this is really smart. This is how we're going to achieve climate. That perfect weather in 1880 that on a Tuesday that, the world has to get back to it. That's the weather we need to have. We don't have that weather, it's the end. And there's your transport. Your personal, the goal is to reduce ownership. That's the consumptive intervention. And it means 0 private vehicles by 2030 per person.
By
So
2030, they want to have 0 private vehicles.
That's right. 0 private vehicles, right? So what you have is you think it's EV versus ICE, right? And all the proponents who are nodding on green, oh, I love my EV, right?
Yeah.
But we don't have near the mining capacity to put the lithium batteries in that would be required for the motorists on the road today.
We don't have the electricity for sure.
We don't have the electricity on the grid. The grid can't handle it. And we don't have the mining done to put the batteries in, right? So it's all a Pyrrhic game. And the truth is we don't want EVs. People don't want the EVs, but it's not about what we want anymore. We have, I have a background in the auto sector for 5 years. And so the mandates that are going with the auto sector are at the OEM level. So, they're making the vehicles. So for them to meet target, if it's 20% in 2024, then that means, let's say 10 vehicles are shipped to your dealership. He sold 8, the dealer sold 8 ICE cars. The OEM, to meet what the government requires, has to send 2 EVs, because at the 20%, they have to send 2 EVs. But the dealer sells all his ICE and no EVs.
But ICE, just for our listeners, it's internal combustion engine, right?
Right. Sorry. Yeah, that nomenclature is familiar to me. It might not be familiar to others. And so the next month, that dealer says, I need another 8. Right? But he's got 2 unsold ICE. Well, OEM, to meet the targets, and if not, it's millions of dollars a month. The penalty is millions, right? So what you're having is a situation where the dealer gets really hit and the consumer gets hit. And if you don't sell those EVs, the consequences are that the ICE has to go up, right? All while we're tanking the economy, right? All while we're like, oh, well, let's do ultimate socialism and just try to redistribute wealth until there's no wealth, right? All while we're doing that. So there is legislative means and regulatory means, but there's also in the report, it says that they would use financial means. So we are at the same time moving to digital ID and digital currency. So we've had recently Nigeria move to digital ID and digital currency, and I'm going to be writing a Substack on it because it failed in Nigeria, and that's kind of really important because CBDC, which is central bank digital currency, as a regulatory mechanism, does so much. I've got to tell you, it does so much. First, it can, as a unified ledger, right, know everything that you're purchasing, tie it to a carbon kind of allotment, and then say, well, you had 2 burgers on, on the first of the month, you can't have any more meat for the rest of the month, or it can slowly wean you off certain types of purchasing. But CBDC is so dangerous. So it can have a negative interest rate, right? So it can stop you from having wealth or accumulating wealth. It can expire. It can be programmed to expire. So you have to use it within a certain amount of time. Again, eliminating the possibility of working hard and saving and trying to take care of yourself and your family. So CBDC is a very dangerous and important component to the plan to take us to the C40. This whole thing, right? Do you bring it into the city? Do you put it on the shelf? Do you make certain things so expensive? I just put something up about, I guess they're a grocery store, Kroger, who have digital pricing. And the danger with digital pricing on their goods is they can have surge pricing. They can change the pricing based on the consumer. They can say, oh, your social credit's pretty low. You're going to have to pay higher. Or you make more money. You're going to pay twice as much for those things, right? They can say
2 people walking into the same store. One of them has a poor social rating and makes a lot of money, and they each pick up a package of a product. All of a sudden, the one when he gets to the checkout is going to pay more.
That's right. That's the problem with digital pricing.
Wow.
I have something I'm working on with respect to digital ID, which is the patents on digital voting, right? When we get to digital voting, the whole idea is you can never have manual recounts. You have to, like, what are you going to do? Open up the computer and look at it? right? You have to
Yeah,
trust,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the globalists to have done it, right? You don't take ID. You don't do manual recounts. Everything's digital. It's a total control matrix, right?
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
going to know online and through the smart city and 15-minute city with the cameras, the biometrics, we're going to known in the physical world. So they're like, oh, I'm never getting rid of my car. Really? So in the 2050 plan with Winnipeg, you're seeing rural wells being mandated to close. So if you
Mm.
can't get your water, right? So how do they do this? How do they get it in? Right? It's a weaponization of municipal bylaws. This is the municipal deep state, and you can't tell me that it's your city or town doing it if they're marching to complete streets, C40, 15-minute cities, global covenant of mayors. If they're marching to that agenda, they're just a tool for the globalists. And everybody's looking at the big, shiny federal elections. I'm telling you, the fight is local. The fight is completely local. And if you do not know what your climate plans say, your changes to your official plan, you do not know what your global covenant of mayors is saying, you have no idea what your city's going to look like. And it'll be like this, just like that, changed. And so again, optimum lifetime is for your car, the ambitious target is 50 years. So if you actually have one, you're never getting another one in your lifetime. And you have to be your own mechanic, I'm guessing. It's going to be like Cuba. This is very disturbing. So the emissions associated with air travel as 2%. This is very disturbing. You leaving your city is part of your city's agenda. Like your complete mobility is part of your city's agenda. So one short haul flight every 3 years per person by 2030. Okay. And so in Toronto, if I wasn't listening to the radio on the way home, I wouldn't have known that they're not renewing the lease. It's potentially not renewing the lease for Billy Bishop Airport. Oh, just close one down.
Wow.
Right? Close one down. They're in France. They're outlying short haul flights. Just close it down. In Britain, they're doing the same thing. Just close it down. So right now we're still traveling, but does the travel, the people working in travel, do they know? Do they know where this agenda is all going? Because it's a war on GDP. And when we look at the Trudeau government, we look at the Liberals, we look at the amount of debt, it's all non-GDP debt. And by that, I mean, none of the expenditures were in situ in Canada for infrastructure that improves Canadians' lives, that gives us jobs, that is anything for the future. It's all spent abroad for the most part, right? Could be, this theory, telling you it's not proven, spent abroad. Like when we hear a location, 750 or 850 million for, toilets on the beach in a country that just recently, some god awful amount for toilets on some foreign land's beach. How do we know that that was a country that was kind of not going to sign on the pandemic treaty or IHR amendments? Like, where's that money going? So really putting toilets on the beach? And should Canadians be spending on toilets on the beach, right? And climate reparations are a next level, again and again and again. It's all leaving the country. Rod, we often talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And this is the mechanism to tie us into the globalist agenda so that speech against the transnational tropes right? Climate, things you can't agree with, gender. You can't disagree with those things. If you do, you might be, in a situation where your professional body will get rid of your license so you can't practice, right? So that DEI. So I like to look at that. And I like to really break it down for people because you are only getting one side of the story. You always get one side of the story. Equity, the same result. Equity is the same result. And so the people who think about this, they go, oh, well, we'll all have the best jobs and we'll all have the best education and we'll all have the best lattes. We'll have sparkles and rainbows everywhere. Yay, yay, me. Right? That's what it is.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. This is equity. The same number of calories is equity. Right? Equity just has to be the same result. These satanic jerks tell us what they do. And we're dumb enough to believe the sing-song version of it. 0 kilograms of meat per person is equity. 2,500 calories, equity.
And it's very difficult to imagine that the fat cats that are setting these goals are ever going to accept those restrictions on their own lifestyles. I just, 1984 and Animal Farm are too clear about what happens, that you're not ever going to have equity, but you may have much more widespread poverty. But you're still going to have people that are in the front lines, the top echelons, able to enjoy the things that we all enjoy today.
I'm going to ask you, Rod. Everybody has a certain level of denial. Everybody on what it is we're looking at. The people who view humans in this way, the people who can tell us exactly how many mouthfuls we're allowed today, the people who can tell us what we can wear, where we can live, how we can travel, if we can leave. Those people, do they stop there? Like, I'm telling you this plan, but it's only a bunch of psychos who have this, right? It's only a bunch of psychos. This isn't the end game. This is their justification for this level of repression. There's not any part of my soul that believes that anybody who thinks this way about humanity, that sees us as cattle, doesn't also see us as expendable, as elimination, right?
Yeah.
You can think differently. It's a big, wide world. But we're all at some level of denial about what we're experiencing in our world right now. And I'm probably on the least level of denial, and I've looked at it. You know how prolific I am.
Yeah.
I've looked at it the most. This is horrific. And because you now have the open air cities, prisons with the Smart City Infrastructure Fund funding, if you look up from the smallest little town across Ontario that I've gone into, they all have the same cameras rolling out, right? They're in your street lights. The cables run underneath. And you say, okay, well, how would these elites enforce this? And have I shown you this before?
I'm not sure. You're going to X, Twitter, former Twitter.
Yeah. And this was in 2022. So they're telling you their plan in 2022, 2 years ago, and they're already announcing again what they're going to do.
We're developing through technology an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
And they want
Yeah.
us all to be delighted and pleased that we're going to have our own ability to track our own carbon footprint. But of course, hidden in that is they're also going to be able to track it.
That's right. And when you have the unified ledger, when you have the idea of a unified ledger, do you know what that is, Rod?
No.
Okay. So it's a code-based system where you have a code for absolutely every activity under the sun that man can do, like whether it's in healthcare, it's in business, it's in transportation, it's in agricultural, it's anything, right? We break down a code for absolutely everything. They've been working on this for years. The OECD has had a list of legislation that would be required for the unified ledger to work. So then once the unified ledger, and there's a code for everything, if you don't take your vaccine, for instance, you have a code for that, right? Everything in healthcare gets a code. What you can end up doing with that is have AI administer humanity, right? And just because it's something you don't understand or we don't have these discussions going on in the media like we should, it doesn't mean that this race for AI isn't happening. And it really is. And so the idea of known online, some of the reasons things get passed are feel-good reasons, like, oh, it's because we are going to clamp down on child pedophilia or porn or what it is. They say that might be the reason that we have to know everything online, right? But it's not, right? That's Bill, I think, C-18. And then C-11, or sometimes I get them mixed up, is, the idea that, well, we're going to monitor for Canadian content. But actually, we're just going to monitor. That's the whole point of monitoring.
Exactly.
Right? And so you look at these, quote, far-right riots, right? You just create the powder keg by being inflammatory to one population and favor the other as a government, right? You create your own situation where you're in a resentment or an anger, and you get the powder keg. And then I thought, oh, well, I think his name is Keir Starmer out of the UK. He had an instant solution to the riots. And no one asks any questions. The instant solution to those riots were by facial recognition, increasing facial recognition. Oh, so we are already, known online.
Mm-hmm.
And a series of arrests went through the UK where they arrested people for their Facebook posts. They arrested people for what they posted, for their speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, that smart city infrastructure that was ready to be deployed, you didn't have one news outlet ask any relevant questions. These are the questions I have. When did you put up those cameras? Because that might have taken a long time. How much money did that cost you? Where'd you get that money? Where do the cameras land? What program do you have that analyzes these images? Who's in charge of looking at those images? When did you hire all those people? When did you train them? This software that you used for biometrics, did you use our pictures on our social media to train it? Right? How did you get our consent to do that? What about all of the the program to do this? Did you beta test it? So you have this ready solution for biometrics that would have required 3 to 5 years work ahead of time to get it ready. And you have one riot, right? And all of a sudden, we need facial recognition and biometrics. That just happened in the UK. right? We have the ready repression. And then this enables that smart city is, quote, activated. We told you about it. We gave you the reason it's going in, right? But you don't have one outlet asking, hey, what about privacy rights, right? Who else is getting these images, right? Who's looking at them? How can they be used against us? So you say, well, how could they implement this stuff? And yet we steadily see this. We see this on the auto sector in terms of drastically reducing your EVs. Now they use the pedestrian accidents as the reasons to, take out and change the streets, and they're using the climate plan. So I say to your viewers, really, we have an issue with the municipal deep state, and no one's talking about it. No one's having any meaningful address, right? And let's talk climate just for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to use I have an environmental science degree with a minor in chemistry, right? I was hook, line, and sinker on greenhouse gas, right? Because that's what I was taught.
Okay.
But I also was taught a lot of basic science, right? And I got into law school on my science degree, so I'm not like a slouch.
Okay.
Okay. Now, grade 5 science is the concept of thermal mass, right? The
Okay.
more dense a matter is, the more it can hold heat. It's called your thermal mass. So, metal that's really dense will hold heat better than less dense water. And air literally has no thermal mass. Do you heat your pasta, Rod, by taking a flamethrower to the air in your kitchen, hoping that the air in your kitchen will transfer the heat to heat the water for your pasta?
No, absolutely not.
Nobody does.
Yeah, no.
No, that's climate, right? That's greenhouse gas. The whole concept is that we're retaining heat in air, and that's going to transfer the heat from the air to your oceans and to your, earth, right? On the other hand, here's another thought experiment that is so basic, everyone can understand it. It's a hot, sweltering day. You're in the sun. You walk into the shade. Does it feel cooler?
Yes.
You go back in the sun, it's hot.
Yeah.
You go back to the shade, it's cool.
Yeah.
The air is the same. The air is the same. The dominant actor for climate is the sun. We're in a 70-year solar maximum. Climate has changed before, it's going to change again. The greenhouse gas is the biggest red herring of all. And another important factor is the relationship between CO2 and temperature is not led by CO2. CO2 follows temperature by anywhere over the history of this by 100 to 800 years. So there is a relationship sometimes, but it's after.
Right.
Right. So, it is a psyop to get rid of our rights. And now I'm going to look. So maybe not everybody agrees with this, but you have to go to not the science, but the incredible amount of scientific publications that are taking place by censored scientists to get access to that. And I report frequently on that, called the Climate Minute in my Substack. So if you're interested in that, you should go there. So we've looked at complete streets. They say they like 15-minute cities. They go to C40. We explained what Global Covenant of Mayors are. And we say that we've explained the consumptive carbon tracking interventions to the person. I think we went through all of them Do I still have share screen or no?
Yeah, you can share screen.
So yeah, we went through the C40 report. Just wanted to check that we'd done it all. And now here is the House of Commons of Canada, Bill C-93. So it's an act respecting pandemic prevention and preparedness. It has been passed as of June 5th, 2024. Okay.
Yep.
And it amends the Department of Health Act to provide that the Minister of Health must appoint a National Pandemic Prevention and Preparedness Coordinator from among the officials of the Public Health Agency of Canada. Now, I have a stack that shows that the Public Health Agency of Canada is a satellite office of the WHO. So just think about that and I'll take you there next. Okay? So,
Most of this, by the
This
way,
is-
on my screen is the text is not too legible on my screen. So, but
Okay, I will be reading then.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas a One Health approach, a multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary, collaborative approach that focuses on the human, animal, plant, and ecosystem health and welfare interface is central to preventing the risk of future pandemics. So if any of you don't understand what One Health approach is, it's basically expanding that unified ledger. It is mapping everything from water to animals to human activities to industry. And so therefore, anything that is human, animal, plant, ecosystem, health, and welfare interfaces, that's their bailiwick. They get to rule on all of that under this pandemic treaty. So your welfare interface is your relationship with your government, right? Like, do you get, basically anything that the government has with its citizen, that's the welfare interface. So that gets them into the area where carbon passports and things like that can be implemented. But don't just take my word for it. Let's read this act because it literally goes into the contents. The Minister of Health must establish a pandemic prevention and preparedness plan. Okay. And it has to have mitigation strategies. I'm not going to say every word in here. And identify the key drivers of pandemic risk and describe how Canadian activities, domestic and abroad, contribute to that risk. So if anything at all contributes to an increase in pandemic risk, they get to, in order to reduce pandemics, right, they get to govern that area. So, wow, that's just everything, because they said it could be plants, it could be animals, could be the ecosystem, could be humans, right? Could be our welfare interface, could be anything, right? And so we go down further, into here. And ensure that standards and guidelines that pertain to prevention and response are aligned with the approach described in 3A. And I'm not there's a lot I'm glossing over because it's a big act, but they have to identify preparedness strategies for public health, including respect of the protection of vulnerable and marginalized populations. So, protection of the rainbow, I guess, is part of preventing pandemics and vulnerable and marginalized populations, including working conditions for essential workers. And so what contributes to the risk of pandemics? And so I just put up that in Google, and you get immediately agriculture. Many of the root cause, this is a study I found at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, right? And Sea Change on climate change. So they believe that climate change, the root causes of climate change increase the risk of pandemics. So C40, Global Covenant of Mayors, Complete Streets, all of that is about climate change. And well, guess what? So is pandemics. Pandemics is about, and they'll about climate change, and they say, oh, deforestation is the largest cause of habitat loss. Then loss of habitat forces animals to migrate and contact other animals and people and share germs. Done. Done. There you go. There you go. That's the connection between climate change
It's
and
kind of a very precarious pathway they have put together for like it's not a very logical.
Oh no, this isn't science. This is the science.
Yeah.
This is the science, right? It's from Harvard, so you're going to have to take it. It's from the public health school.
Yeah,
So
they
it's
know
all
where
the
they
public
want to
health.
go, and so they create a mythical path to get there to justify their plans, I guess. And we shouldn't be surprised, but it is.
That's exactly it. There, let's find the studies that show
Shocking.
climate change is happening. Let's find the studies that show it has to do with pandemics, and let's find the studies that. So guess what? The next sentence is large livestock farms also serve as a source of spillover infections for animals to people. Oh, so, you know, they said you can't eat meat in C40. This is all working together, don't you see? Less
Yeah.
demand for animal meat and more sustainable animal husbandry could decrease emerging infectious disease risk and lower greenhouse gas emissions. Okay?
Yeah.
So you lower greenhouse gas emissions and you lower your risk of pandemics, right? At the same time, by you not eating meat and by agriculture changing mandatorily, right? Again, this is public health, Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and public health and climate change. Okay, he's found out that people who live in places with poor air quality, now this is how you get your cars out. You see how he's done this?
Mhm.
Pandemic are more likely to die from COVID-19. So you having a car increases your risk of dying or other people's risk of dying. And so that too, this is Harvard, may influence the risk of death, such as pre-existing medical conditions. So they all put it all together. And what's next in this Harvard study? Climate change has already made conditions more favorable for the spread of infectious disease, including Lyme, waterborne disease, which cause vomiting and diarrhea, et cetera, et cetera. So pandemics get us to climate lockdowns and the C40 restrictions that we just looked at. Okay. And we have to reduce the risk of pandemics by reducing growing crops, because that's deforestation from growing crops, and raising livestock. So that's basically us eating, right? So are we really solving for climate change? Are we solving for humanity being alive? Like, it's very, very disgusting, and everybody just nods. Yeah, and if you discuss it, you're a denier. But a look at the origins of COVID-19 reveals that other forces may be in play. We've escalated our demands on nature such that today we are losing species at rates alone, blah, blah, blah. This rapid dismantling of life on Earth owes primarily to habitat loss, which occurs mostly from growing crops and raising livestock. Okay? So you start at, this is about pandemics, but you get that habitat loss is coming from growing crops and raising livestock. If you don't grow crops and raise livestock, you're not even eating. Okay. Another major cause of species loss is climate change, which can change where animals and plants live. Oh, okay. So again, this is so tenuous and circular, right? So species loss is because of climate change, which then in turn change where animals and plants live, and then there's diseases. Well, if we can't eat, like, who do we really care if there's a pandemic? To combat climate change, we need to drastically decrease greenhouse gas emissions. So they say right out in this study, this public health study. Okay, so let's go back to the pandemic legislation. Do they equally spell it out? And Rob, for your listeners, Rod, I should say for your listeners, they do. So what is to be included? The following information to be provided by the Ministry of Industry. This is what we're seeing is a war on GDP. What this pandemic treaty does is a war on GDP. The Ministry of Industry, okay, has to provide the manufacturing capacity in Canada with respect to any product relevant to pandemic preparedness, including vaccines, testing, equipment, personal protective equipment, the measures that the Minister of Industry intends to take to address any supply chain shortage, the communications capacity, the infrastructure for electronic platforms, tools, including electronic applications that enable contact tracing of persons. Here's your vaccine passport. This is exposed to infectious disease that could lead to pandemics. This is, you need to be tracked, because if you don't, we're not decreasing the risk of a pandemic. Nowhere in this act does it say we are going to reduce gain of function research on organisms, which would be the single most relevant thing to do to reduce pandemics. It's not there. So
I heard recently a great interview between Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Senator Rand Paul about that whole topic of gain of function research and how it was lied about so blatantly by Fauci and his minions. And they absolutely, the conclusion is clear that COVID was the result of gain of function research. And that type of research on other pathogens is still going on today, taxpayer funded.
right.
Yeah.
So we passed Canada's new pandemic legislation. It talks only about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It talks about vaccine passports, and it talks about vaccines. And here we get into consultation with the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. The Minister of Industry and provincial government provide the measures for reduce the risk posed by antimicrobial resistance. 2, regulate commercial activities that can contribute to pandemic risk, including industrial animal agriculture. Right? We went to the T.H. Chan Harvard study that said, well, animal agriculture increases your risk of pandemics through greenhouse gas. Specifically, what did we pass in Canada? That we have to regulate commercial activities, including industrial animal agriculture, but not just industrial animal culture, presumably anything that has CO2 as an output, that CO2 for, the movement of goods, CO2 for the movement of people, all commercial activities, right? So that gets your travel, all commercial activities that could contribute to pandemic risk through this greenhouse gas gets locked into this. And so when I said how this pandemic is related to C-40, which is related to Global Covenant Mayors, which is related to complete streets in 15-minute cities, it's all related. It's all the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's all the same repressions. Promote commercial activities that can help reduce pandemic risk, including the production of alternative proteins.
Well,
So we're reducing our meat consumption because of something that we just passed in June 2024. Do our farmers know? Right? Do your restaurateurs know? Right? This is eating bugs to reduce pandemics. So when something gets put in front of Parliament and people nod, oh, we got to reduce pandemics, past that. We've got to reduce climate change, past that. We're talking about enslavement of humanity. Okay, phase out commercial activities that disproportionately contribute to pandemic risk, including activities that involve high-risk species. Okay, so that's going to involve, habitat in rural areas. And so you're going to have to come into the cities. This is passed. This is our pandemic treaty, essentially. And this is in the federal government. And who in the agricultural sector is following this? Include the following information to be provided by the Minister of Environment. Okay. After consultation with relevant provincial ministers, a summary of changes in land use in Canada. Okay, so we're going to change how we use land across Canada in relation to disturbed habitats. So maybe that's your rural communities that could contribute to pandemic risks such as deforestation. Now they said agriculture contributes to deforestation, so we got to stop that. Encroachment on wildlife habitats. So you having a cottage, or you living in a rural area, right? So they have to change land use in Canada. This is a complete coup.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Encroachment and urbanization that were made. In the case of the first plan since the last report on changes in land use published under the Federal Sustainable Development Act. Kind of think that's one that we should look at too.
Yeah.
Who knows what they're doing in that one. In the case of updated plans during the reporting period. So every 3 years, this plan has to be updated. So the ratcheting, right? Oh, they're going to run through these viruses and pandemics, and it's going to be crazy. But don't worry, we have a plan to reduce it. And it's going to be you in a tower in 350 square feet getting bugs. And once you're there, tell me they're going to stop at that?
Folks, you need to go to Lawyer Lisa Miron's Substack, which is lawyerlisa.substack.com, and you will find information about all the various topics that we touched on and much more than we touched on today. It takes quite a bit of time to get through all the details of this, and thank you for tying it together for us. What other thing, just before we close, what other thing would you advise people to do to educate themselves and to take action to resist this move by government and by the world elites, to control our every type of action as individual sovereign Canadian citizens?
So you really do have to interact with your councils now. It's time to do that. In order to do so, and to do so with other like-minded individuals, you can join Action for Canada. They are doing presentations across Canada to council. They're pushing back on climate plans. The only way to push back is at the local level. And so you have to, we've been isolated from each other. We have to almost know our neighbors again and get in there. It's really frightening. The Plan 2030 in Winnipeg and rural communities surrounding it has been very aggressive. And over 1,000 people showed up at the municipal meeting, and they said, oh, we're going to move it to Zoom. And they said, no, we want to be heard.
Right.
And so they're going to try to get another venue, and that gives them 40 days in Winnipeg. If they can close rural water wells, right? If they can change your official plan that you have to have 8 units in your family home for you to keep your family home, we're talking about a massive expropriation of property through these climate plans and through these climate agendas. And we're told on the news what the next fancy thing to look at is. It has to be at the municipal level. I have one thing, Rod, is that China has a bunch of empty cities, right? They built a whole bunch of cities. And the cover story for that is that, oh, they just did it because it was a real estate play for the economy. Everything is being tested in China first and rolled out here. You don't think that that isn't a smart city open air prison test? So what did they do in those open air prisons that nobody lives in? I think we're at the 11th hour. And I think people will know when they look at the complete streets for Canada.ca. And I think people have to get offended and have to get angry and have to demand the changes.
Yeah. Well, very good. And I totally agree with you that we need local action, and that, also school boards, as well as municipal councils, regional councils, and so on, because you're right. A lot of the things that have come into federal legislation and provincial legislation began at a local level, and some of this stuff we have in terms of our social laws regarding LGBT issues and things like that at the federal level came about through one or two court cases in various provinces across the country. The court case went the way that the agitators wanted it to go, and that became a justification for changing our national laws. Yeah, we have to look at the small details. They're not small really, but that they're disguised as small details, and they are ultimately affecting all of our lives across the country and around the world. So, Lawyer Lisa Miron, thank you very much. Folks, go to her Substack and keep yourself informed on these things. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today. We really appreciate it. And we'll keep pressing forward, all of us individuals across the country who care about these things. We do need to become more connected in some ways so that we can affect the change that's required to survive and for Canada to survive as a country of democratic practices.
Absolutely. And I think if the left only knew that this was the agenda, how many of them would be supporting it?
Yeah.
Like I think they're all in the dark.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I know a lot of good people locally here tend to be on the left, tend to vote in that direction, who actually, if you get to know them as people, they want the same things we want. They want
That's
to have
right.
a piece of land, they want to raise their kids in a respectful manner, but they have been deluded partly by tax-funded media like CBC and so on, and partly by the clever distortions of words that pass through local councils, as you've brought out so well. So,
Yeah, and I think we have to reach them. Okay.
Yeah, God bless you, and
God bless you.
join us again sometime in the future. Hopefully when we see things moving in the other direction, but if not, we'll come back to you to find out where the battle lines are being drawn at some date in the future. So thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye, Rod.
Bye-bye.